Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with Louise Minchin and Dan Walker.
Our headlines for you today: COVID booster jabs for the over 50s. Details will be set out today for a UK-wide programme, as the Prime Minister says the pandemic is far from over.
Vaccinations for children aged between 12 and 15 will go ahead in England after ministers confirmed last night that they accepted the Chief Medical Officer's latest advice.
The government has accepted this recommendation. We will now move with the same sense of urgency we've had at every point in our vaccination programme.
Lawyers for Prince Andrew tell a court in New York that sexual assault allegations filed against him are baseless and potentially unlawful.
Enjoying the limelight. After her win at the US Open, Emma Raducanu is currently at one of fashion's biggest events of the year, New York's annual Met Gala.
Keeping Stonehenge standing, the ancient monument undergoes its first major repairs in more than 60 years.
And after a bit of a damp start, western areas should brighten up today, but through some parts of central and eastern England, we could see as much as a month's worth of rainfall. That could cause some minor flooding. I'll have all the details here on Breakfast.
Morning, it's Tuesday the 14th of September. Our main story for you: a UK-wide plan for COVID booster jabs for the over 50s is expected to be set out by ministers this afternoon.
It will form part of a strategy to manage the pandemic over the winter after it was confirmed last night that children aged 12 to 15 in England will be offered a single vaccine dose from next week. Our health correspondent Michelle Roberts has more.
It's clear this will be no normal winter and the NHS is braced for a very busy time. The pandemic continues, with plenty of coronavirus around to infect yet more people. On top of that, there will be flu and other respiratory viruses that put pressure on the health service at this time of year, as well as a backlog of treatments disrupted by COVID. The Prime Minister is expected to announce today that certain measures such as lockdowns shouldn't be needed to control the virus during the coming months. In his plan for winter, Mr Johnson is expected to repeal parts of the Coronavirus Act, such as powers to close schools and businesses or restrict social gatherings.
The JCVI, the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation,
And for the over 50s, they can expect confirmation later today that booster vaccines will be made available to them.
the JCVI have received the data from the Cov Boost study, where we looked at all the different vaccine brands, in some instances full doses and half doses, as to which is the best vaccine to boost with. And I can assure him that we will begin later this month with a major booster programme, and of course flu has already begun.
And after ministers in England last night accepted advice from the UK's chief medical officers, there will be a drive to get children aged 12 to 15 vaccinated against coronavirus from next week. Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland are expected to follow suit.
I can confirm the government has accepted this recommendation. We will now move with the same sense of urgency we've had at every point in our vaccination programme.
But questions remain about how it would work in practice.
It opens up a number of other issues. Logistically, how will this work in a school or college? But secondly, what happens if there is a dispute between a young person and their parent? What we don't want is our members who lead our schools and colleges to feel in any way that they're part of that.
Those are just some of the issues ministers and school leaders will need to grapple with as we head into the winter months, with the Prime Minister warning that the pandemic is far from over. Michelle Roberts, BBC News.
Well, let's get a little bit more, if we can, on the government's winter plan from our chief political correspondent, Adam Fleming. We did talk about this yesterday. What else are we expecting from ministers today?
Well, we actually got a very short statement from Boris Johnson from Downing Street last night, which has got two interesting bits to it. The Prime Minister says the pandemic is far from over. In other words, preparing us for this virus to be around for quite a long time. And that's just in such contrast to the sort of thing he would say at the very start of the pandemic when he said it could be over in a couple of months. He also says that thanks to the vaccine and the precautions that the government's going to hold in reserve, there shouldn't be a need for significant restrictions on our freedoms. Now, that suggests that the restrictions on our freedoms could be close to significant, so maybe not a national lockdown, but in a worst case scenario, we might still be asked to make some sacrifices in terms of how we live our lives. But the details will be set out later today. And it's just worth remembering a lot of these things will be kept kind of in the toolbox for various scenarios that may or may not emerge depending on how the virus develops over winter, and of course how it interacts with flu, where ministers and officials are expecting a potentially quite complicated combination there. And I think we'll be hearing things that we've been talking about already for the last couple of days. Will there be more strict rules about where you have to wear masks? Will there be a change in emphasis on back to the idea of working from home again? And then of course we'll ask lots of questions that we've been asking throughout this whole process. Who will decide when these restrictions come in if they're needed? What will the thresholds be for when they actually kick in? And what sort of patchwork will we end up across England? And of course there will be a different patchwork across the UK because the different devolved administrations get to implement their own versions of their own plans. We're expecting to hear from the Prime Minister in Downing Street this afternoon, and it'll be against a bit of a sad personal backdrop for him, because overnight we got the news that his mother Charlotte had passed away. So just a reminder that people in public life making big decisions on behalf of the rest of us still have their own personal family lives to live as well.
Absolutely. Also, last night ministers confirmed their plan, didn't they, to push ahead with vaccination of 12 to 15-year-olds, and that again is in England. How's that been received?
So this has been long awaited. Ministers, I think, were getting a bit frustrated that it took the scientists so long to actually get here, but got here we have. Key bit of language there, they're talking about offering the vaccines to 12 to 15-year-olds, and that is because the scientists acknowledge it's a combination between the vaccinator, the people who are giving the vaccinations, the parents, and the child as well, because the children who are getting the vaccine have to give their consent to receiving it. That's a long-standing convention and actually part of the law in the UK for decades. You hear a little bit of concern from teachers and head teachers that they're going to be drawn into this. I was speaking to a head teacher from Suffolk last night, and he was saying, this is very much up to the NHS and the people administering the vaccines. We as the school just want to provide the venue, and if we have to collect consent forms and if we have to hand out leaflets that are answering people's questions, we will do that. But the teaching profession very much not wanting to get involved in this issue, which is quite controversial for some parents.
Adam, thank you very much indeed for that. And actually, we'll be speaking to you later. Also later, we'll be speaking to the Vaccines Minister, Nadhim Zahawi, also speaking to a head teacher as well. And we'd love to hear from you this morning. What do you think about those plans specifically? Yeah, let us know if you've got any specific questions as well for the Vaccines Minister. It's one of those mornings where sort of seeking as much information as we possibly need information. Can. Yeah. Elsewhere today, Prince Andrew's lawyers have told a pre-trial hearing that legal action accusing him of sexual assault is baseless and should be dismissed. Virginia Giuffre has launched a civil lawsuit over the alleged abuse, which she says happened 2 decades ago when she was 17. The Duke of York has consistently denied her claims. Our North America correspondent Nada Tawfiq sent this report.
Well, this first hearing really centered more on procedure rather than the allegations. Those allegations, of course, Virginia Giuffre accusing Prince Andrew of sexually assaulting her in London, New York, and the U.S. Virgin Islands when she was just 17 years old. Now, the Duke of York has strenuously denied those allegations, even saying he has no recollection of ever meeting Virginia Giuffre. But in court, it really did focus on the steps ahead. Prince Andrew's attorney told the court that he had 2 main arguments. First, that the papers were not properly served to the Duke of York, that the UK High Court had to weigh in on the legality of service. And secondly, he said that they believe this lawsuit was potentially unlawful and baseless. And what they said they wanted was to see a 2009 settlement agreement between Virginia Giuffre and Jeffrey Epstein. Now, they believe there is a release in that agreement which would absolve the Duke of York of any legal obligation. Now, Virginia Giuffre's attorneys in response said that they thought that was a mischaracterization of that settlement. They also said that if Prince Andrew does feel that he was not properly served, that he needs to put in a formal motion through the court so that that could be litigated. Now, the judge will hear oral arguments in October 13th, and that will be in person. The next chance these parties will have to once again debate whether this case can get underway.
The travel body APTA is calling for a significant overhaul of the government's traffic light system. The group says measures, including the use of PCR testing, means the industry is still not able to function fully, and it's putting people off travelling. The government says it recognises the challenging time facing the sector and says they are keeping the system under review.
Wait for this. A tuxedo, sweatpants, a suit of armour and a floor-length feather cape were some of the outlandish outfits on display at the Met Gala in New York last night, one of the biggest events in fashion.
Celebrities like Billie Eilish, Kim Kardashian and the new US Open champion Emma Raducanu were all there. So was Mark LaBelle.
Celebrating the best of American fashion, Billie Eilish in step with Marilyn Monroe. Meanwhile, taking off next, possibly the world's newest Grammy Award-winning superhero, rap man Lil Nas is certainly in touch with himself. Tennis star Naomi Osaka's heritage was centre court in this colourful mixture of her Japanese and American backgrounds. And fresh from her A-levels, oh, and that tennis match, look, it's Emma Raducanu.
New York is back. Right. The US Open, the Met.
I've kind of gotten used to being a little introvert, but I'm back outside, so I'm excited to see everybody.
We've had a tough time, so to be back, to be here at my first Met, to take up space, to chop my hair off, it's just a whole thing.
Actress Nicola Peltz was joined by her beau Brooklyn Beckham. And one leading radical Democratic politician used her gown as a visual frown to the many tuning in to this expensive fundraiser. While others just chose to dress less or go full feather, the show-stopping outfits kept coming. After last year's show was cancelled, it seems these mainly young celebrities couldn't wait to get back out into the limelight. Mark LaBelle, BBC News.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.